Hey everyone, and welcome back to Gotcha Interact. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the initial info that we do have on Skirk, looking at her initial kit and giving kind of our first impressions of what that might be, and also maybe some helpful insight for you if whether you already don't know about Skirk or you do already know about Skirk. Let's dive right in here, and I want actually to start with you, Vixen. What do we see with her Ascension and just getting right into her kit?
Well, looking at the baseline of just initially jumping right in, she's going to be ascending into crit damage, which is going to help out because if we look at her weapon, you're going to be ascending into or getting crit rate from the main stat. So obviously balancing those two out as a DPS makes a lot of sense. She's going to be a cryo sword user, so her weapon is going to follow in suit. Now looking at her skills, we have her normal attacks. Now her normal attacks do nothing in and of themselves on their own, so let's go ahead and take a look at her skill. Her skill is Havoc Warp. It states that it imitates the combat style of the Foul, produces different effects depending on whether you tap or you hold it. The tap version states that Skirk gains 45 Serpent Subtlety and switches to the 7-phase flash mode. The hold version states that Skirk gains 45 Serpent Subtlety and will continuously move at high speed. Her interruption resistance is increased in this state as well, and during this time Skirk can control her movement direction, and she can even use this skill to end her rapid movement prematurely. As you can see basically with the chart we'll throw on screen, with this really you're seeing a lot of just constant damage, but its own modifiers as well. So the normal attack is not going to have any damage changes when you use it. So obviously when you're doing normal attacks and using your normal attacks, your charge attacks, your plunging attacks, it's going to be based on the skill's actual talent level. So make sure you're focusing on this talent level specifically. But really looking at this skill, it seems like obviously you're kind of gaining almost like a Wanderer where you're gaining Kuguryoku points and then you're going to be slowly eating those up. Now we'll look at some other things later that will show how she's going to be using it specifically, but Rift, what can you tell us about her burst?
So looking straight at her burst, and we'll have this on screen as well, Skirk's elemental burst is not reliant on elemental energy, but instead on Serpent Subtlety, which you just talked about in the skill actually. When Skirk has at least 50 Serpent Subtlety, she can expend all her Serpent Subtlety to unleash her elemental burst, ripping the space before her apart and using rapid consecutive slashes that deal AoE cryo damage. At the same time, the damage dealt by an instance of this elemental burst can be increased by every point of Serpent Subtlety over 50 when it is unleashed. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Malwika's fighting spirit there. Up to 12 points can be counted for this purpose. So that looks like you need 50 to use the burst. You can go up to 12 after that, so 62 points of Serpent Subtlety. Also, when Skirk is in her 7-phase slash mode from the skill, the burst will be replaced by Havoc Extinction. Now looking at this, it states that a special elemental burst that can be used even without consuming the Serpent Subtlety, so that's very interesting. After you do use this, Skirk's going to gain All Shall Wither effect, which is going to last until 7-phase flash ends. After unlocking the passive talent, Reason Beyond Reason, which we will look at here in a minute, she can also absorb nearby void rifts. While All Shall Wither is active, every 0.1 second after Skirk's normal attack hits an opponent, that normal attack will deal increased damage. If she absorbed any void rifts while using Havoc Extinction, or the special ultimate basically, this normal attack's damage will be further increased based on the number of rifts absorbed. This effect will be cancelled when it has triggered 10 times. And then also looking at some of the multipliers for that, I'll have that on screen as well. We see at talent level 10, or having it crowned without constellations, the skill damage is pretty hefty, and it also is going to be happening 5 times. Kind of reminds me of other bursts that are multiple instances of hits, kind of like Wanderer. I know you mentioned him earlier as well with the skill. Wriothesley, there's a few others you can mention. So it's not just it's one hit, it's kind of a barrage of hits. The skill final attack damage is also there. So it has the initial 5 hits, it looks like, has a final hit. And then that bonus based on her Serpent Subtlety, remember if you have 12 over the 50, each point that you have over that up to 12 is going to be a nice attack increase. So that'll be pretty fun. Once again, just remind me of a character like Malwika doing a similar kind of mechanic there. And then with the Void Rift pickups, that kind of reminds me actually of Neuvillette, how he just picks up the water source droplets. Maybe kind of a similar mechanic. I don't know, maybe I'll hear your thoughts on that later.
With Nod Cry coming out, do those prices inside the shop make you wanna cry? And really looking at it, Does this make you feel like you can't get any more Genesis crystals for yourself? Well, I might have a solution for you. If you want more Genesis crystals for less, power up your Genshin Impact adventure with Lootbar, the ultimate top-up service trusted by gamers worldwide. With Lootbar, you get instant delivery, secure transactions, and zero hassle. You don't have to use any passwords with your account to actually get the transactions done, and there's no issues and worries to go about it. Whether you're topping up for Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, or any of the other top gachas, and even other games as well. And here's the best part. New users now get an exclusive 10% discount on their first purchase. That's right, more Genesis crystals, more pulls, and more fun. Hopefully winning those 50/50s. Now all at the same time going on for less. Now, are you ready to start your journey? Go ahead and check the link in the description down below and check the pinned comment as well to grab your deal now and start stacking up on those Genesis crystals today. And now, back to the video.
Vixen, I guess, what are your thoughts maybe further on the burst if you have any?
Well, I think overall in the kit so far, we're obviously seeing that she's going to work by using her skill initially to do most of her damage with normal attacks, possibly charge attacks, just to really get a lot of her damage out. Most likely you'll be doing the normal attack combo. In her skill, she does have in her the modifiers, her third and fourth hit has like 2 hits after each other. But really overall with that seems like what it's going to mainly be. At the same time, just keep in mind that while you are doing this, your maximum Serpent Subtlety can go up to 100. So you can get to 62 is the maximum to use to get the extra buff through the burst and whatever. But the maximum you can hold on to at one time is going to be 100. Now, let's go ahead and quickly talk about her passives, because that's actually going to tie in her kit a little bit more. Some of the other things and other characters, sometimes the passives can kind of get pushed to the wayside, but really a lot of the things that they're talking about in the skill and the burst actually are getting kind of proven or furthered in the passives. So let's go ahead and talk about the passives. That Reason Beyond Reason passive that Rift was talking about is stated next. It says that when nearby party members trigger Frozen, Superconduct, Cryo Swirl, or Cryo Crystallize reactions, basically any type of cryo related reaction, anytime you do that against an opponent, a Void Rift will be created near this opponent. This effect can be triggered once every 2.5 seconds, so it does have a quote-unquote longer cooldown if you think about it, just because of how fast she's most likely applying and normal attacks are going. This is only happening every 2.5 seconds, but it's when a nearby party member, so it starts at the beginning of rotation even if Skirk isn't on the field. 3 Void Rifts created by Skirk herself can exist on the field at one time as well, so there can be more Void Rifts created, but only 3 at one time. Skirk can use the following methods to absorb nearby Void Rifts. When she hits an opponent with a charge attack in her 7-phase flash mode, so when she's in her skill mode, if she does a charge attack, that will also absorb one. When she uses her special elemental burst, Havoc Extinction, while she's in her 7-phase flash mode, so make sure when you're in the skill state that you're using the burst, that special burst, to actually trigger that special burst. Then also when she holds her elemental skill, Havoc Warp, to engage in rapid movement. So holding your skill, doing a charge attack, and doing your special burst is going to actually collect those Void Rifts. Each rift absorbed by Skirk will grant her 8 Serpent Subtlety points. So this is just another way to get more of those subtlety points actually over the normal initial 45 that you get in her skill. So that's kind of, once again, shows how actually necessary her passives are to help her do more things. So here we aren't seeing really too much of an issue with her being what a lot of people are going to talk about in the future, or what we're going to specifically also talk about, so her being very much tied to cryo, but the next passive talent looks like it might.
Yeah, so looking at this second passive, it states that when nearby Hydro party members deal Hydro damage, or when nearby Cryo party members apart from Skirk deal Cryo damage, Skirk will gain the Death's Crossing effect for 20 seconds, and this can stack 3 times. Each stack's duration is counted independently. Also, each character can grant Skirk at most 1 Death's Crossing stack by this means. So all that means is your other 3 characters, the way you're going to max out these 3 stacks of Death's Crossing, they have to each come from each character. You know, the same character can't give 2 stacks for Skirk here, which is why, like you said, Vixen, this is probably pointing to that more Frozen-oriented team, or just Freeze team, like you're saying, if you want to maximize this specifically. Now, what does Death's Crossing actually do? Well, each Death's Crossing stack increases the normal attack damage dealt by Skirk in her skill mode by 110% on just 1 stack, 120% on 2 stacks, and 170% of all 3 stacks of its original damage, and increases the damage dealt when using her elemental burst, Havoc Ruin, by 105%, 115%, or 160% for 1, 2, or 3 stacks respectively of its original damage. So Yeah, like you said, Vixen, this is really pushing for all three of Skirk's teammates to be within that hydro cryo thing, which does make sense. You know, we all kind of knew and expected her to go in that kind of archetype because of someone like a Escoffier. A lot of people knew and anticipated Escoffier to be Skirk's best in slot support, and that still is the case here. That lines up with this passive. It just kind of lines up with how she wants to be played, and Escoffier is just in and of herself really, really powerful. So a lot of this makes sense, but my initial take on this is that obviously if you are going after Skirk, you need to kind of have a Escoffier because there is a third passive. I guess I can just read it real quick. It just states that when all party members are either Hydro or Cryo, and if there is at least one Hydro or one Cryo, party members' elemental skill level is increased by 1. Just once again, another reason to use only Hydro and Cryo characters in the entire party. So that's pretty interesting. Reminds me of Child. Child is one of those only characters that increases the normal attack talent by 1 in his kit. And similarly, Skirk is probably one of the only characters right now that is increasing a skills level by 1. So that's just really interesting and cool. That's going to be helpful for not only herself, but once again, Escoffier, Farina. You know, you can kind of see where this is all pointing, and kind of getting to our next topic of discussion, Skirk's restrictions. And so is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And I guess, Vixen, I'll just ask you initially because I've already been talking for a while. What are some of your thoughts on this?
Well, we have already talked about this previously. And now to just actually kind of bring it out to you guys, the initial issue has always been, and people have already talked about it, people in the community have been talking about it, other content creators, that her biggest issue is that she is restricted to freeze, basically. And at first, when you look at her kit, you maybe not initially see it, but it's really these passives that start to come out. You know, the first passive just being cryo-related reactions, doesn't matter that much, but as soon as you get to that second, and even technically that third passive that are just restricting you very much to mostly, if not all, Hydro and Cryo members, then it really starts to become an issue. And that's the question, is this really an issue? Now, I think that it is very restrictive and it can be a little annoying, but I don't necessarily think that a character right now, especially being power creep right now is a little bit of something that's always on somebody's mind, or, you know, when you're pulling a character, you know, is this character just going to get instantly power crept by another character soon? You know, what does that mean? So I think that overall, with her being tied to specifically freeze with the Hydro and Cryo teammates, I think that it is very restrictive. It's pretty expensive as well, wanting, like you talked about, characters like Farina and Escoffier, never mind other characters that might be outside that, like Shenhe, Yelan, whoever in the future. But I do think that overall, it's become an interesting debate. No matter what, I think that they are 110% right. It is a problem, and it is an annoyance, is what I'll say. But I do think that it does help, to an extent, push away from the idea that we could just slap Malwika in here, or do another character that's really good off-field, and just instantly make the team that much better because you're just throwing Malwika in the team. You know, and I think that that's possibly why they're trying to do this, is trying to restrict maybe really, really strong characters put together. And we'll talk about how really strong she is in our next topic, but that's at least my personal thoughts. What about you, Rift?
Yeah, I think you're sort of on the right track there with, you know, just because of all these other characters. You know, we have so many characters in Genshin and we keep getting more. So that means there's just more possibilities. And I think what they're trying to avoid, like you said, is certain mashups that could just be utterly broken, regardless of things that are pushing for a character to be used in a certain way. You know, what if in the future a certain Electro or Dendro character comes out that now you want to use Emily in an aggravate team, or in like, okay, Emily doesn't want to do that, but somehow this is utterly broken, and you know, it's not intended. It's not intentional. And so maybe that's something there with the Mawika thing, like you're talking about, could definitely be a case. So I think that's just what they're trying to stay away from. You know, I was looking at, you know, in the Reddits, and we saw some memes. One of the memes had Skirk on the left side, and it just said something like needing Farina, needs a Escoffier, you know, needs probably Dahlia or Yelan to in that last slot there, and is like, you know, I'm minimally better than Ayaka. Cool, like this is my best in slot team. You need this, absolutely. And then on the right side it had Varese, and just like, just give me any of the 4-stars that were on my banner and I'll just crush everything. And I'm like, that's kind of funny. And even canonically speaking, we were talking about this earlier this morning, Vixen. It doesn't make sense that Varese, who's just a clumsy cowgirl, and not, you know, take away from that, you know, I love Varese personally, okay, I do. It's just funny how we've got this, you know, random cowgirl in Natlan who just has an orchard and is just like, yeah, I love food. And then we've got Skirk here, who canonically can just, you know, throw around the narwhal like it's her pet, whereas Novelette has a hard time dealing with it, and is like, yeah, I might be on the same level in my best team. And that's just kind of crazy to think about from that perspective. But
yeah,
I guess moving on to the actual expectations, what does her damage actually look like? Now, we're not going to show actual footage and stuff like that. We don't like to show that kind of stuff for reasons, right? But when we did watch a lot of it, and maybe you guys have too, and based on what other creators are saying, what the community is saying, it's not looking that much better than Ayaka. We're probably thinking anywhere between 10, 15, maybe 20% more than Ayaka, which just doesn't bode well, because I think the community as a whole was just expecting something dramatically higher, like almost double damage or something, like something ridiculous, especially because Skirk has a restrictive kind of just nature. So she
Right.
needs to be kind of powerful and worth it to a sense if she's going to be that kind of niche, if you will. So that's posing its own problem. So I don't know. What do you think about the power level of Skirk?
I totally agree. It's the Nilu issue all over again. And it's the quote unquote issue I bring up. Because if you try to put Nilu in a vaporized team or something like that, it just doesn't work that fantastically. But when you do Nilu Bloom, it's extremely strong. And it was back in the day, and it was one of the best teams you could do with Nilu and Nahida and doing all of that. But she was very restrictive. You know, you had to have, you know, it had to be the Bloom team. It had to be, you know, all Hydro and Dendro members. And it very much fit its realm. You know, it was very, very strong. And it was sometimes, you know, over time, getting the weapons, getting other characters with their weapons, it could be a little bit more on the heftier side of maybe investment. But at the same time, it was very worth it because of the damage that came out of it. On the other hand here, you have the two issues of high investment and, oh yeah, but I get a lot of damage, like Nilu. Or you have really low investment, like you have Faresa, but really high damage, but you don't have that high damage, you know? So here you
Right.
have the high investment, high restrictions, no damage whatsoever. And I don't mean no damage, it's just similar to a character like Ayaka. And I know we were talking about this the other day. If Ayaka really is the similar standing as Skirk, if Skirk's really putting out the same amount of rotational damage, if you just swap them between by still using Farina, Yelan, or Shenhe, and Escoffier, if that's really the idea and you're still doing that and just swapping out Skirk and Ayaka, is it really, you know, what's the real point? And I remember you talked about this, and it was a very good point you brought up the other day, which was, well, what about Wriothesley? Wriothesley was seen as a better character than Ayaka. I mean, pre-Skirk, he was the cryo DPS. I mean, yes, a lot of people made fun of him. You know, you had to do this, you had to do that.
Cryo DPS.
Yeah, now it is, but I think that overall that becomes a little bit of a problem. You know, what does Wriothesley do at this point? You know what I mean? That's what my thought process goes to as well. Now that you've kind of said that to me, so it's definitely a little bit weird.
Yeah, I wasn't originally looking at Skirk. You know that just from what I've talked about. I pulled Escoffier for my Wriothesley. I was like, I'm not really, you know, looking at Skirk. But Escoffier stood out to me just because she's a really great buffer. I can play around with that with even some 4-star options like Chongyun. It'll be great for theater, you know. So it's still not a bad pull for me. You know, I had the Wriothesley, right? And I'll just go ahead and say it. Because I have the C2 Wriothesley, now that I look at this Skirk stuff and see where her power level is, I'm sitting here wondering, I don't even know if she'd be better than my C2 Wriothesley in that Farina, Escoffier, Yelan team. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would be neck and neck, maybe. So I don't know, man. It's just, and you know, and this is version 1, so you know, hopefully we should see some increase. I think they're just trying to be careful. So they want to see the feedback. They want to see just how powerful she is after some of the beta testers are playing around with it, so they can get some good positive feedback from that. And you know, because I don't think they want to mess up with this. This is a awesome character.
I think that's exactly what's going on here. I think the version 1 was played down heavily so that they can slowly increase it. And you know, that's the great thing about being on the bottom floor, is that you can only go up from there. So being on the similar power level as Ayaka, you know, that might change things.
Yeah, I definitely think there's still hope. You know, yeah, like you said, if it's the bottom floor, you can only go up. And so if the bottom floor is still more powerful than Ayaka, that is a good sign.
Right, but the thing then comes into play like a character, you know, like Dahlia, who's going to come in the future, that's going to increase attack speed. And if he's going to be a character that works well with Skirk, then, you know, possibly the higher attack speed might actually help out with the team. Is that really going to help out with the team by making Skirk hit faster? Is that going to be more helpful? Or is it going to take away from a character like Yelan or something who could do really good damage and buff? You know, Dahlia, we'll look at his kit later. He doesn't necessarily seem like an absolutely broken 4-star either, especially for this team. You know, there's a lot of interesting things that are coming around that you've got to think about. But I totally agree. I think it's going to be an interesting play with Escoffier. You know, Skirk at the end of the day is tied to Escoffier. You have to use Farina because the off-field Hydro application is very easy to use, plus her damage buff. fourth character really becomes a slot twist of either Shenhe, Yelan for personal damage as well as buffing, Shenhe for just an insane amount of buffing, an extra cryo character maybe if you need it, and then possibly Dahlia in the future, which is a 4-star. Trying to compare to these other 5-stars is really not looking great for him. But hopefully in the future versions we'll get some changes. But that's at least my thoughts specifically on her. She looks good. Animations are amazing. Really, really good character. I think just through the different versions, they're going to slowly increase her damage and kind of try to fix things without breaking them. Because I think we're getting into Nodcry. I don't think that they're going to try to absolutely bust a character and make them go absolutely sicko mode right before the part of the Cryonation actually comes out.
Right. And another thought of mine was anything that Dahlia can do for Skirk, can't he also do for other characters? And the only way he's not going to actually do other things for other characters is he's also going to have a restrictive kit or something that's like, hey, when you do this.
I see the Ayato brain start ticking in your brain over there.
Oh, no, like the hyperspeed Ayato thing. Yeah, it is a lot of fun. But, another thing is if they are worried about Skirk just being simply too powerful to be used in other comps that just aren't freeze, it's something untraditional, and like you mentioned a lot earlier in the video, just throw Mad Weekend there and do some crazy comp and it works because of the sheer power of the characters. If that's the fear, then they could do something that they did with Mulaney's kit and actually see a damage decrease when certain things happen in a certain scenario. Like if just make Skirk's melt damage a lot lower, like there's a damage fall off, because if you remember, Mulaney has that thing in her kit where she does less damage if there's, I forget what it is specifically, but you guys know what I'm getting at. And so proof of concept, if they did that with Skirk's kit, I think maybe then they'd be more willing to actually raise those power levels. And who knows, maybe they are thinking about something like that.
Yeah, I think we'll see in the next few days the changes. This is just the initial burst kit releases that we've seen, and everything that we can kind of get out of it so far. But if you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like, subscribe. Let us know what you guys think of Skirk down below. What do you think the damage is? Do you think it's actually even worth it to pull her at this version 1 right now? Hopefully in the next few days we'll get some changes. But what do you guys think? Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Go ahead and let us know down below what you guys actually think. If you guys do want to as well, we have a Discord if you guys want to join that as well, where we do try to be there as much as possible. But besides that, that's everything we've got for today's video. So thank you guys once again for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.